The first session this afternoon is dedicated to the client journey. We've touched on this topic several times in previous SoFI, but we think it's so important we want to come back to it. And we want to look at the client journey, certainly with respect to financial services providers. Look at that client journey and look at some of the obstacles that clients encounter in that journey, in that five-stage journey, and also look at some of the solutions and some of the improvements that have taken place since we started talking to you in 2013, and what some of the FSPs have done to make that client journey easier for these clients. So in order to lead the panel on this, we asked somebody with a lot of experience in this area who's been working in a number of functions dealing with the client journey with her clients and in her own institutions as well. Petronella Chigara-Dhitima is the Managing Director of Mustard Seed Advisory. Would you please welcome her to the stage and her panel as well?
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon. Akwaba to the afternoon session. Bonjour, mamkase, habari zenu, how was lunch, murimutio. I'm trying to pick all the African languages that I remember. Bonjour, ekaro, and the Nigerian, of course, etisen. We are in Ghana, and the Ghanaians will say enye. And then they would say, Nyamia Domwo. Okay. So welcome to this panel this afternoon. We're continuing this discussion on client centricity, and specifically, as Roger said, we're focusing on the client's journey. How are clients moving along their own journey, and what are the experiences, what are the barriers? So this afternoon, we're really privileged to have a very interesting panel. I will start off and talk a little bit about myself. I keep those two names, Chigara-Dhitima, because one is a trade name, the other one is a constitutional name. You know, according to our constitution, I cannot drop one of the names, so I have to keep it to be constitutionally right. And I do work in the financial inclusion sector. I do consulting work. Most of my working life has been in this space, and I enjoy what we do. We actually work with the two sides of the market. We work with the providers of financial solutions, and we also work with the demand side with the clients and do offer financial literacy programs and a few other programs. We were talking this morning with colleagues about digitizing SMEs, small businesses, and introducing technologies that will make them more efficient. I do most of this work. We actually run as a company. Most of our work is in sub-Saharan Africa, so we do understand the issues in the region. And the panel that we have this afternoon is also drawn from people that have had lots of experience in the sub-Saharan Africa context. So I will call the panel onto the stage, and then I'll go back to the context about why are we talking about what we're talking about today. So I will start off with Soren Heitmann. Soren Heitmann, welcome. Soren Heitmann is actually working with IFC, and he is in charge of the Partnership on Financial Inclusion, which is a partnership between IFC and the MasterCard Foundation. Thanks, Soren. He is the one who was hiding it, but thank you. And Soren, most of the work that he does is actually on the research side. And someone over coffee break this morning said, let me introduce you to this cool guy who really loves research, and that's Soren. I said, oh, okay, yeah, I know he loves research. Data-driven, he goes also into qualitative, and he's gonna share with us this afternoon some of the insights that they are getting from the research and the deep dive that they are doing in sub-Saharan Africa, 4 countries actually that they worked in. So that's Soren. Welcome, Soren. And we also have on the panel Jennifer McDonald, and Jennifer is working with Women's World Banking, and Jennifer is in charge of product development. She's actually the director in charge of product development, and she leads the digital practice. So she has been working a lot, and as Women's World Banking, they've been working a lot with partnerships across sub-Saharan Africa and other continents as well. but she has lots of experience in many countries, Nigeria, Tanzania, Malawi, Mozambique, of working with MNOs, working with commercial banks, and really trying to make sure that they are understanding how the customers are feeling along the journey and resolving some of the barriers that they are facing. That's Jennifer, welcome. And last but not least, we have Adaeze Ume. Adaeze, welcome. She's working with Diamond Bank, and her title is the first time I have ever seen a title like that. Her title is, and they are standing up to welcome her. Thank you. Her title is, she is called Segment Head for Youth Propositions. And as you can see, she's really youthful. They did the right thing. They brought the right person for this work. So she is actually going to talk to us a lot about what Diamond Bank is doing in the youth space. They have other products as well, so she's going to talk about the products around women as well. And let me just also mention that actually Jennifer, McDonald, and Adaeze, they're working together because Women's World Banking is actually also working with Diamond Bank as one of its partners. So the beauty about this panel is that it actually cuts across 3 of the segments of the client centricity ecosystem. So we have IFC, investor, TA. We also have Women's World Banking, who are representing like technical assistance, and we have Diamond Bank, who is a practitioner and the actual provider of financial services. So what we want to do this afternoon is almost like carry over from where we started off in the morning. There have been lots of discussions and lots of examples of what client centricity actually means in real practice. What we're simply doing this afternoon is presenting it from 2 perspectives, where we get insights from Soren, from the study that they've done, and then we get an opportunity to hear what the practitioners have actually been doing with it, because Jennifer will talk about what has been happening in Malawi in terms of how have they been using some of these insights to actually respond to the clients. And we go back to the discussion because our theme, our topic for this panel is revisiting the client journey. So we really want to go back and say, what is this client journey? So I'll ask them to put back the slides so we can go back to where we were in 2013. I was in that symposium when there was this whole talk about the client's journey, and GSMA actually did a presentation. So that's the client's journey, which we started off in 2013. And when we present it like this, it looks very straightforward and very linear. But during this panel, we're actually gonna listen and share experiences about this client's journey and how the clients are walking through the journey and the kind of barriers. And we also hear whether it's this straightforward and whether it's this linear. We also hear those kind of discussions and the kind of challenges that people are facing or financial service providers are facing as they try to respond to clients who are moving along this journey. And another interesting bit about the panel is that we actually have PUMSA in the room. Remember the morning talk about PUMSA? Roger introduced us this issue about PUMSA representing the client. So Soren is actually going to be the voice of the client on this panel, and he'll keep us reminding us of what the clients are actually saying. Okay, so to get us started, and as we kick off, I'm not even going to say a word. I'm going to ask Soren to start sharing with us the findings that they studied, this ethnographic study that they did as IFC. What were some of the insights that they got? And we will hear from Soren. So Soren, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction. And yes, I'm looking forward to speak to you about our ethnographic study. Ethnography, this is anthropology. It's the study of people. It's the study of culture. This study spent 9 months of field work interviewing people in Cameroon, DRC, Senegal, and Zambia. The overall aim of this study was to give voice to the user. users and non-users of digital financial services. And the conclusion of the study was a framework that synthesizes all of these voices into a set of questions that we can use in our own analysis to better understand the customer, understand their journey. So this is our framework, our tree. Although, let's see if it goes, there we go. So at the top of the tree, it articulates trust. And trust is really how people are motivated to take up digital financial services, what drives or inhibits their decisions to really believe in the service and their proposition. We've decided to use the framework of a tree because it's natural, it's growing, it's organic, it's complex and not linear. Just in the way that cultures and societies, they're not linear, they're complex, they're growing, they're dynamic. And we thought that it was a good metaphor for the ethnographic approach to really understanding what decisions people make and how they go about making them. Let me just very quickly go through each of these bubbles and describe the framework, and then we'll get into the customer experience more directly. So there's 6 elements. Starts at the bottom, at the roots, the historic roots of monetary transactions. So we're bringing new products into the market, but people are bringing their own personal histories and their cultural histories when they approach a new product. The mobility of people and money. Is there a cultural norm of remittances, of people traveling for work, sending money home? Do they use intermediaries? Do they trust those intermediaries? Risk perceptions. So the perceptions and misperceptions of services and the risks that they bring really affect the trust of a service. Do they understand it well? Do they tell their friends, I believe in this product? Or do they say, no, it will steal your money, and whether it will or won't, it's a little bit secondary to their own perceptions around those risks. Technological appropriation. Clearly how people use technology and they relate to technology is important, but this also describes how technology can change the way social behavior exists and social dynamics. And do people feel anxious or afraid that their social norms might be affected by the technology? Networks of belonging. Do new products bring people closer together when they transact, or do new products take existing social relationships and pull them apart, which can also create fear and anxiety and reduce trust in products? And finally, economic hierarchies. Within society, are people inspired by affluence and encouraged to grow their wealth? Or is the idea of creating wealth actually create anxiety where they feel it might be taken outside of their normal zone of comfort? So I'd really like to highlight that the framework is designed to be used. So here it's a graphic, but really it's a path for us when we're approaching customers and trying to understand their perceptions. It's a framework for asking these questions. So again, let's get into the fun stuff. And I'd really like to share some vignettes, some stories of the customers themselves. I don't have time to get into all of them, but I've picked 3. And again, this is the voice of the user. So you'll forgive me for reading directly and actually quoting them, but this is their experience. So I'd like to start with historic roots of monetary transactions with Mr. Cassian Endi, who says, in the mid-1980s, most banks collapsed because of mismanagement and corruption in Cameroon. So how can I depend on Cameroonian banks again? Even the money transfer agency like Express Union and First Trust that also provide saving and loan schemes, I don't trust them. I only receive and send money. So clearly, Mr. Endi is very skeptical of the financial system. But knowing this and asking this question, is there a way that we can approach the customer in a more trustful setting? So taking some of the research findings and stepping away from Cameroon and in Zambia, for example, we found that respondents were potentially more open to a value proposition from an international telecom precisely because the mobile network operator was an international firm and not associated with the national government, and precisely because the telecom was not associated with the bank. So let's look at another bubble here. And I'll move up to number 4, technological appropriation. And so this is a quote by a policeman in Senegal. He preferred to remain anonymous, but he said, with the development of money transfers, whenever a family member asks for money, you can no longer claim that you can't get it to them, because if you say that, the person will answer, well, you should send it by Wari or Joni Joni. So people in Senegal, they ask their friends and family for money. But you can't say no if your mother or your brother asks for money. I mean, this is rude. This is not socially acceptable. But what is socially acceptable is to give polite excuses. You say, my car broke down, the road's washed out, it takes too long, it's so difficult. And so what our policeman friend is expressing is a fear that the technology itself will change the social dynamic in his ability to make excuses and deny requests, to politely deny sending money in a socially acceptable way. So what does this mean for us? And I'd like to make a hypothetical here and say, let's imagine that we're going to launch a product in Senegal and we want to do a market survey. And so we go out and we ask our policeman friend and all of his friends, and we say, would you like to send money fast and easy? Now imagine that they're all responding to that and they said, send money fast and easy? No, everyone's going to be asking me for money and I'm going to be broke. So let's say you get the survey results back and you see a bunch of low scores. And you wonder, why are people giving low scores? It's such a great value proposition. And the really important thing to recognize here from a research point of view is that what we're asking about the value proposition. But the answers that we're receiving in this hypothetical are really about fears of technology and what that means in terms of how they might be using it. Yeah, and just a final point is to say this is really why we need to look at cultural understanding when we go out and we do research. So let me do a final story.
We're going to come back to the final story, but what I wanted to do, because on this point, which is very interesting, because I think earlier on we were talking about the business case, and I mean, this kind of like talks to what is the client seeing about what we're proposing? Is the value proposition making sense to them, or is making sense more to us than to them? I mean, this for me was really mind-blowing. I mean, when Soren explained to me this finding, I was like, well, I always thought that's what digital is all about. And to think about it, yes, from a social perspective, it may even affect how much they can save, because now they can't put money aside because all of it goes, because digital is so fast. So what we would like to do is to hear from Jennifer and how. So Jennifer is going to take us through sort of a case study. What have they done in Malawi and in Nigeria as kind of a response to some insights, which are kind of research insights similar to what Soren did, and we'll come back to Soren. So Jennifer, if you can just take us through how you have responded to some of these insights and created something that has a value proposition that makes sense to the client and also to your business.
Thank you very much, Petronella. So I think at the beginning of the panel, you said that the client journey is not linear. Can we just put up the slides? So the client journey is not linear. And if we think about what will be our best chance to move our clients along from taking that first step on the journey to getting to the point where they're so excited about it that they're going to bring all of their friends onto the platform, the best chance that we have at that is by building in those moments along the way where we can listen to them, understand their issues, and hopefully address them so that we can help them along the way. What I liked hearing about a lot of the stories from Soren's research was that idea of products being not for me, and that's something that we've seen in a lot of our work. So these issues are quite important, especially for women, because as I'm sure many people have seen, the power of word of mouth when women bring their friends on board is really powerful, but women are also much more likely to go and tell their whole community if you get it wrong. So once you've abused their trust, then you'll see the impact on the bottom line straight away. I'd like to talk to you about Pafupi Savings, which was a proposition that we developed with NBS Bank in Malawi. This was a program that was supported by UNCDF Microlead and MasterCard Foundation. And the job was to find a savings solution that would help the bank reach to rural areas, and especially focusing on how they would be able to serve women. When we went out to do the customer research and we listened to women about what issues they had, we found, unlike some of the panels this morning, that women were actually really excited about the idea of having a bank account. They truly believed that if they had a bank account, they could put aside just those small amounts of money that would let them plan for the future and achieve the goals that they had for themselves and their families. But it was hard to get a bank account in Malawi because where they stayed, there weren't any banks. You'd have to take transport, you'd have to pay for transport to go into town in order to get the bank account. It just wasn't worth it for the small amounts that they had to save. And anyway, they were pretty convinced that banks weren't interested in those small deposits that they would be able to make. Also, anyone who had had even a little bit of exposure to a bank account knew that if you were going to leave a small amount of money in a bank account, the fees that banks charge would just quickly eat up your money. So these were really strong perceptions that clients had. And so when we designed the product together with NBS Bank, which was just a very simple savings account with an agency banking solution, we really focused on drilling down on those key benefits that would message directly against those preconceptions that clients had about why banks had never been for them in the past. So first of all was the name of the product. It's called Pafupi, which in Chichewa means close to you. Pafupi is an account that's close to you because the bank also put together a team of direct sales agents that would be moving around in the communities to open the account. You wouldn't have to go into a bank branch to open it. You could open it instantly right there. And then after that, you'd be able to transact right there in your community or in the trading town nearby using agents. We also messaged that no amount was too small, so that those small savings that you have, even 200 kwaisha, you could go and deposit, which is about 50 cents. And finally, it was affordable because you'd be earning interest on the account, and also you wouldn't have those monthly fees that made having a bank account expensive. So when we went out to do, so this product went to market, and when we went out to do research afterwards, after the launch, and to hear what clients thought, we were amazed because in group after group after group, the women repeated back exactly these benefits to us as the reason why they were really excited about having the account. And they illustrated it with examples from their own lives. Did you know with this account you can even save 200 kwaisha? And that's great for me because I used to have to spend 600 kwaisha to go into town, and that's the only way I would be able to have a bank account. So with this one, it helps me save. So we thought this is great. It went to rollout. It was going to national rollout, being offered all across Malawi. And sometime later, we decided to check in and do some research. We were doing some new product development. And what we heard in those focus groups was very different from what we'd heard in the first set. The clients had gone from being kind of psycho fans of this account and being very excited about the benefit to not really being able to articulate what was good about it. In fact, when we asked them, are there any benefits of this account, they said, we're not sure. They said that if you open this account, they might give you a kitenge, a wrap, and that kitenge has not come. So we're not very happy with the bank right now. So that person's definitely not going to go out and be promoting the account to anybody else. And it also has a direct impact on active use of the account and dormancy. So when we looked at that, we realized that the bank had actually gone through some cost-cutting measures and had decided that instead of doing the training directly from head office of new sales staff, that the old sales staff would be able to do on-the-job training with the new ones. So we had message dilution, and it had an immediate impact on the uptake and usage of the account. The other factor that we uncovered in that research won't be a surprise to anyone. As they say in Malawi, savings and agent banking goes together like nsima and relish. Or maybe since we're here in Ghana, we should say like fufu and goat soup.
Yeah.
The two things go together. So anywhere where we didn't have reliable, available agents, it had a direct impact on the usage of the account. So those are some of the things that we learned with Pafupi. I'd like to also just speak briefly, somebody added some ensima and relish. Thank you. Good. We've just had lunch, so no one's hungry anymore. Okay. I'd also like to speak about a similar program that we developed with Diamond Bank. So we're here on the panel with Diamond Bank. Similarly, we went out to develop a simple savings account targeting a very different market segment. There are probably not two more different markets in the world than rural Malawi and urban markets in Nigeria. Those are really different environments, and yet we found some of the same things. Certainly, there wasn't the same distance issue. Nobody had to pay money to go and bank. In fact, the banks might only be just a few steps away from where they were trading. But customers had a really strong perception that banks didn't have anything to offer them. They knew about banks, and banks were not relevant. So also with this product, we really worked with the bank on developing the proposition that was going to work for customers. And the thing that made the difference for them was to build on the informal savings mechanisms that are so common here in West Africa and were really being commonly used in the market. So the bank set up its own direct banking channel so that they have, at this point, about 1,200 people employed all across Nigeria who are moving around in the markets to open accounts and then to do doorstep banking for customers, and that's proved to be a very strong proposition for the bank. We've continued to work with the bank on developing the proposition so it'll have additional product features, and in particular, we've had support from UK Aid through FSD Africa, and we've been working with the bank to continue to develop it with additional savings wallets, self-service channel, and digital credit coming soon. So since we have Diamond Bank on the panel, I'd love to hear from Adaeze about how Diamond Bank set off on this financial inclusion journey, and also about her specialty, which is youth banking.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Oops, lost the slides. Oops, we're going back. Okay, you go ahead.
So for us in Diamond Bank, our foray into the financial inclusion segment started off some time back in 2013. At the time, the FINA's reports were quite compelling, when 46.3% of the Nigerian population was financially excluded. So we had looked at that market at the time and worked with Women's Board Banking to actually have better customer insights. And we realized that a lot of these customers were actually very economically active, though playing very heavily in the informal sector. We saw men and women who had or claimed to be very, very time poor. They wouldn't leave their business premises for a second to leave for any bank for fear of loss of business revenues. We saw people who had real confidence issues because they had been underserved for a long time, and all of a sudden banks were focusing on them, and most of them went, since when did we become the sweet spot? So that skepticism was really palpable at the time. And we also found out that communication was key because they were in a different wavelength from the mainstream banking. So at the time we looked at all that and said, look, if we must serve this segment, then something has to give. Then there was that strong institutional shift, taking the bank to them. And that led us to the establishment of the Better Friends Distribution Channel Framework, which Jennifer said we've gotten up to 1,200 friends. We're actually on site to provide their banking services, taking deposits, having customers do the withdrawal, but most importantly, having that human interaction, because they had to manage the objections. They had to manage those kickbacks to actually get them to be financially included. So that also made us to be very strategic with the name. The name is actually Better Value Proposition. It's actually the pidgin translation for something better. So the acceptance has been very good. When you look at the fact that in 4 years, for that segment alone, we've been able to acquire 510,000 clients. And out of this number, about 40,000 have gone on to take additional products on committed savings. And then they're doing a lot of activity in that segment and have about 37% women representation there. So that's it for Better. So moving on to youth segment, my habitat, where I belong. At the time, 2014, when we looked at the macroeconomy, it was discovered that Nigeria has the highest youth population in Africa. We're talking about 60% of the population in the youth segment. So that was very compelling. And then the bank had to also decide on what's the business case here. Clearly, is in the long term, cost of acquisition is relatively low. If you considered affluent segments where you can have about 2,000 clients acquisition in a month, youth banking, you're looking at 16,000 clients. So we knew that it was important to begin to build them as a pipeline to the other segments of a retail bank. Diamond Bank today, we're running at a client size of about 16 million. At the time when we're looking at the statistics, we're only doing 2 million. So when we looked at this whole thing, we had worked with Women's Board Banking again to look at the real deep insights on the market segment. And clearly, we found that prior to what we're doing before, which was having only a Diamond Kiddies product to serve them, it was adequate but not sufficient, because we clearly saw that it was a multi-sided market. We saw women as a key player there. We saw parents who were eager to actually save for their children, but never had a structured means of saving money for them. We also had the teens themselves who wanted to be financially in control of their money. So they face the challenges of affordability and access point because the distance to the banking halls were, quite far away. Then we also saw the students who actually had affordability challenges, financial literacy challenges, as well as having very strong aspiration as to how to get workplace ready. Because of the huge unemployment rates, they saw that as a major problem for them. So having looked at the deep customer insights, we're able to say, look, for us to make that product market fit in this segment, we had to establish something similar to an endowment plan for the parents, so that if they actually are able to have a structured means of saving every month at the end of the 12 months period, they will get what I'll call 13-month bonus, which is like 20% of what they do on their monthly installment. So they will reward them for the committed savings. And then to actually add an additional perk for them, we noticed that during summer periods, most of them didn't know what to do with their children because they had about 2 months vacation. The reason why we went into strategic partnerships with Center for Tech, who would actually teach the children on how to code, as well as came up with fun finance games to actually keep them busy. So these things actually have helped to address some financial literacy of those younger children who are between the ages of 0 to 12. So in our transition strategy, or in trying to look at the entire segment, I would like to also mention that we took a 3-step multi-generational suite of products approach, so that once you're 0 to 12, you're actually still running a minor account, and then when you're 13 to 17, you're having a cool teen added to you, and once you're 18 years, when you're in school, you can actually take up the swag account. By the way, swag means students with a goal, okay? So, so for the cool teens, what have we done for them? The issue of affordability clearly was tackled. Take, for instance, we give them free debit card for free and lower the opening balance barrier to as low as 500 naira. So when you would go to a typical bank of about 1,000 naira as minimum opening balance, you will have it in Diamond Bank for only about 500 naira. Then we also developed an Adopt a School initiative where each branch outlet was required to actually adopt to schools and nurture them, grow them in financial literacy, and that has actually helped. And then we also run online competition contests to actually get them involved and begin to build their financial capability. So have we done with the students, and also partnered with some organizations to actually get them CV writing skills, as well as do some series on how to start with what you have. So the whole idea is that in the value chain, or in that whole process of trying to grow, right from 0 to 12, 13 to 17, we're looking at each life stage need so that we can actually optimize your long-term economic opportunities. So having said that, I would like to say what has been the impact. In less than 4 years, we've actually had 770,000 clients in our book in youth segment. We have 270 schools, which we're actually nurturing with our Adopt a School strategy. And it's only in youth segment that you have the gender parity quite closed up. I'm talking about 48, 49% in gender distribution. And then you would ask, what's the next big thing for us in Diamond Bank? So this month, actually, we'll be launching a special online community for our cool teens. I showed some of the people at the cocktail session yesterday what it is like. It's actually a youth portal that is a gamified banking system. So we'll be using point system, badges, contests, competition on an online platform to actually have them learn transactional savings accounts, as well as digital means of learning financial literacy. So you have animations of financial literacy stories, you have games, financial literacy stories, as well as comics. It's so engaging because yesterday I had some adults there for a long time. That's to tell you how it is. So the whole idea is that if you're actually able to engage them on that platform with real transactional account, and plus all those non-financial services beyond the financial literacy, I think we'll be doing a good job of giving them that very good long-term economic opportunity.
Wow, this is very interesting. And I think let's give a round of applause for the panelists. very interesting examples of success stories. Before we went for lunch, we had that question about what are you doing, and here are some of the stories of what's being done. What I want to do is just give Soren a minute to finish off part of his story, and then I will ask one question to the panelists and turn it over to you. In fact, I have prizes for those who ask questions, so get ready. So Soren, yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to share one more story. And it is one about not for me. And I think it's also important that there's a lot of consistency across all of the research in terms of the customer journey and the customer voice. And this is from Mr. Laseli from Zambia, and it pertains to our economic hierarchies category. He says, bank accounts are prestigious, and it would be nice to have one, but we are just not the right class. The banks require so many papers to fill just to open an account. You also find that the buildings themselves are intimidating with those flashy windows. I passed through one bank where you can't even be served unless you press a machine for a ticket. That told me that this is really not for someone like me. Mr. Laseli's customer journey literally takes him past these intimidating windows, and when he finds he's able to go in the doors, he has another barrier, and he goes out. But this is actually a happy story, and it's a happy story because Mr. Laseli goes on to explain in this particular interview that he's a very avid agency banking customer. He likes agency banking, and he likes agency banking because it's informal. And I think that this is really the point to drive home here, is that the informality is actually the value proposition, or at least a core part of that value proposition. And I think that the challenge for us in this case is to ask ourselves, how can we give Mr. Laseli increasingly formalized products in a way that doesn't create a boundary where he feels intimidated by that formality? And just to close on the ethnographic research in this framework, I think that this structure of being able to ask questions and look at these issues to understand these dynamics and these barriers also helps us to find solutions.
And it's interesting, actually, that they said agency banking is informal, but it's also got this social aspect around it, because the agents are typically people from the community, so you have this social connection, which is also something very interesting. And turning it over to the two practitioners, if we talk about the experiences in Malawi, and I know, Jennifer, your experience is cut across different countries. In the morning, we talked about, if this thing was so easy, everybody would be doing it. So it means there's something that has to give in, or something that has to change with the institution. So if you can just, like 1 minute each, give us one change that either NBS, or you may not even mention names of institutions, but to say, this exactly is one thing that had to change for us to respond better to the customers as they were speaking to us, and as we were getting these insights, this is how we responded. So if, Jennifer, a minute each to respond, and give us an example of the change that you went through.
Sure. So I'll speak to the Beta case from Nigeria. So the research has really consistently shown, as we're developing new products, that the customers say, this is a great product. Whatever more you bring for us will be welcome, but please, that beta friend, that person who's coming to collect my savings, that person must always be there. So don't let that one go. So that's really put that figure of the beta friend at the heart of everything that Diamond Bank has done. Even though it's digital finance, it has a human face, and that's a really important part. So when we design a new marketing scheme, when we offer a new loan, I think the example from Denis from Microcred this morning of, you offer a digital loan and you think I should send out SMS about it so the customer knows, and then immediately they call their person that they know to find out whether it's really something for me that they should take up. So that's something that we've really built into all of the product development work with Diamond Bank.
Great example.
For me, I think I'll put it around what we did with the standing order. So we ran an initial campaign to ask the customers, okay, why is the uptake of the committed savings low? And then we realized it was a case of lack of awareness. So this time last year, we had about 13,000 customers who were on the dedicated savings plan. So when we improved the communication, used all the outlets, used Women Month like March 8th, we ran a special campaign around that to actually encourage the women. And it was so overwhelming that as of now, we have 56,000 subscriptions of the standard order, and then in the distribution of 60-40 in favor of women. This is a clear case of we acted on customer insight and we got the results.
One thing that Adaeze mentioned earlier on when we were having a chat was that, they actually have an army of people that go out, because the Susu savings collection, for those who are familiar with West Africa, you literally go stall to stall and collect money. And she said, but Diamond Bank never used to be like that. So it means in its own structure, it's got, the whole HR, the way the incentive is structured, the way they train people. They have to think about this army of 1,200 people who were not on their payroll before, but whom they had to engage. And that meant something had to give. So lots of examples of changes. I had a second question, but I want to open up to the audience so that people can ask questions. And remember, I've got prizes for.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Mugweli from Post Bank, Uganda. I want to thank all the panelists. Those are very good lessons to share. And I have a quick question for Adaeze. I looked at your app yesterday. I was impressed. And you have given us a very rosy picture along the client journey. Are there any points along the way that you experienced as you launched this product? Then number two is, how did the competition, or how has the competition reacted to your product? And three is, how have you protected your ideas from being replicated by other competitors? Thank you very much.
Wow, those are many questions. So
only three.
Adaeze, you have 3 questions. Maybe we, while you're writing them up, is there somebody else who has a question for a different panelist, not Adaeze? Yes, so we allow a second question while Adaeze is working out all the solutions to the 3 questions. Then we'll come back to you, sir. Yes.
I'd just like to ask Soren a little bit more about your population that you surveyed in the 4 countries. Did you choose them randomly? Did you choose representatives from different types of geographical locations, users of services, informal savings groups? So that kind of questions more about the methodology. And then what are you going to do with that information? And is it online?
Mm-hmm.
Shall I go ahead while you're writing?
Adaeze, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for the questions. So on the Dreamville.ng, actually, it's a product we're going to launch this month. But the initial take-up or initial building challenges, we noticed that, for instance, the girls had challenges with, operating them. But those barriers or those challenges, we got a lot of support from Women's World Banking, because they made us go to particular schools for the focus group sessions to actually get the feedback. So if you notice on the app, you could see places like touch here. Those were deliberate reaction or deliberate points or buttons actually put there to actually speak to that customer feedback. And those things came mostly from girls. So in terms of having to react to challenges that we're seeing. So I think those focus group sessions actually would help us incorporate all those feedback in the portal. So that's why you had a seamless experience with it yesterday. Then have we had competition? Yes. In fact, after launch, a number of banks have actually launched the product. But here is the thinking. Nigerian huge population is a big one. It's actually in the interest of the clients that we have more competition actually serving them. I'm talking about 60% of 180 million. So whatever the competition is really, it's never anywhere close to the gap or close to the challenges at hand. So for now, it's okay. And I think the last one is around, have we protected the bank? Yes, we have protected, but we are also, the customer centricity is very, very key to us. Back in the days, you would see banks that would not have a full customer information display on their website. Now, all our products and services on our website, if you need to copy them, that's fine. The space is big enough for everybody. Yeah, that's my reaction to that.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that there are certain things that are very easy to copy, things like the product features and so on. But when you look at the key elements of how it's being delivered, so in the case of the youth proposition where you're combining that suite of products with now the youth portal engagement as well as the non-financial services, that's kind of the secret sauce that's harder to take and just move to another one. I mean, similarly, so the same proposition that was designed in Nigeria, we learned from that experience and then went on to partner with our friends from NMB in Tanzania. Stephen Adilia is also here. So the Wajibu proposition was launched, and even before the press release, the name had been taken by another competitor, and they were talking about it. But they haven't achieved what that bank has achieved because they've really thought about how it's going to be delivered, which is a really differentiated thing than just the simple thing of the name or of the product features, which are easier to copy and paste.
Soren, you can respond.
Yeah, so we had a question on ethnographic research around methodology, the population, and how we intend to use it. So first of all, again, the countries of analysis, Cameroon, Senegal, DRC, and Zambia, was trying to look at differences across Anglophone and Francophone. The high-level response there is actually not much, at least not categorically different. And then within each country, 2 cities were selected, one very urban, usually the capital city, and then either peri-urban or rural, depending on the context. So for anthropological research, in the so-called thick description, it's really about getting out and knowing people, spending time with them, living with them, going to their houses quite literally. So it's not a huge population. I don't know in total, but maybe 200 or 300 people in total. Various methods were used. Focus groups quite specifically, individual, we called them profilings, but soliciting people to actually literally go to their house and learn about their job a little bit and learn about their use of services, and then ad hoc discussions. So, just even chatting to somebody on the bus or going to marketplaces and soliciting input from this point of view. And again, it was 9 months each in each country, and there's a research team through a local university anthropology department that was going out and conducting these research studies. And I think it is important how the longitudinal aspect of it and actually really getting to know people is important. One of the feedback that came back from the researchers is that over the course of time and getting to know people, sometimes people would confess and like, actually, that thing I told you a few months ago, it's not really true, because so many customers, they're used to mystery shoppers, they're used to agent inquiries, they're used to visits from everybody like us that wants to know stuff, and after a while, agents are like, yeah, they want to know this, tell them that, they'll be happy, they'll go away. And some of our anthropological researchers, they encountered that. They're like, oh, it's another mystery shopper coming and knocking on my door, and they'll tell them, I love the service, it's great. But then over a few months, they realized that it was actually very different, and you get a very different perspective.
Very interesting that you would even look at the way people actually live their own social lives and really learn as you live with them than just fly through, extract information and go. Great. So we have, I have time for just one last question, one last burning question. So there was a hand here. I think that question has already been asked. So there are 2 hands here. Let's quickly get those 2 questions, and if you can just have the questions one after the other, and kindly let us know who you are directing it to.
Yes, thank you. This is about the research. I'm Sharon D'Onofrio from the SEEP Network. I want to understand better that insight you described where people don't necessarily want money that's easy to transfer. So how do you take that insight and design a product? I mean, what would be the response from a provider's point of view of using that insight? And do you have an example?
Yeah, your question actually relates to the previous question was about using the research. And the study is forthcoming, so it literally will be published any day now. So it's going to be on our website. I think MasterCard might also be able to distribute it. But in terms of how you actually use insights, so the framework itself, again, it's just bubbles, but it's bubbles of inquiry. And I think the important thing to realize here is that each bubble can be a driver or a barrier, and it's about getting into the context and understanding it. So in the research paper itself, we've actually tried to aggregate it at a national level to try and understand markets. And there's basically, we've categorized it as certain factors, a barrier or as a driver. But when you look at it more holistically, you get a picture of how readily people are likely to trust a product or trust a proposition. In terms of actually using it and getting it operationalized, what we're doing is we're taking the results of this, and even in our own surveys. So I made the point about how quantitative survey, you just ask a question, do you like fast, easy money? Yes or no? People, yeah, of course, everybody's going to say yes, but may not really think that, when I use it, the technology is this, or actually I don't trust banks, so I'd never go there. Actually creates barriers. So we're trying to incorporate these meta questions into actual structured surveys so that we get better market insight.
Can I jump in there as well?
Yeah, yes, you wanted to add.
I'll just say that what you hear from customers can be immediately turned into what you highlight when you do your marketing. And a lot of people think of marketing like what's on the flyer, but it's actually what people tell your customers about your product. So if they've said that it's not a priority for them, then it's going to be way down the list about what you're talking about. So fast is not important. Okay, that's not the first thing you talk about. So you just immediately turn it into how do you message when you speak to the client. There's an example of a mobile money product that led with a send me money button, and it didn't go well. Nobody wanted to see, none of the users that would adopt that would want that kind of functionality available, that lots of people could ask them for money.
So Jennifer, you're talking about creating a value proposition that really makes sense to the customer, but also making sense to us. So in this case, that would not be the key selling point. I had promised one lady there, and that's the final question.
I'm Charity from Zambia, and I'm interested in the discussion on agency banking, because as FSD being market facilitators, we've been trying to support agency banking in the rural area. But the demographics of Zambia, and from what Adaeze gave, the moving about and the service provider getting to the customer, how feasible is that cost-wise? What is the business case for it? What can we do to help the bank achieve the business objective? What about the cost terms, if you could shed more light? And then secondly, regulation. In Zambia, we find that when the banks go into the market, for them to set up agency, they have different requirements as against the MNOs and the third parties. How is the regulation in Nigeria? How supportive is it for pitching agents everywhere? What are the KYC issues? How can your experience be? How can we go back and share with the banks that are thriving so much to succeed in agency banking?
Wow, Charity, you have just opened a whole session on regulations and how do we make this, how do we make this whole digital landscape even a level playing field? So really, there's lots of issues. It's a real packed question, and I hope, people here can also pick up some of these topics for other discussions, even outside of this. But I will allow Adaeze a minute to respond. She may not even do justice because she only has a minute, but we can always take it off.
So in a nutshell, those concerns are real. They are real, which is why, like the earlier session said, there has to be that strategic understanding of where we are in need, and it must be in the long term. Because sometimes these figures hardly add up, especially from the pressure of short-termism. So if you're looking at investing in that segment, you have to have that long-term outlook, because they're heavy costs. They are heavy investments, especially with respect to making those outlets actually available to the customer or moving closer to the customer. So clearly, a business call has to be made from a strategic level. Then in terms of regulatory, yes, it's also a concern, which is why sometime for us, actually in Nigeria, the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, which was launched in 2012, was actually supportive of that whole ecosystem, because sometimes you would need the support of the regulators, because some wide stream decisions or adoption has to make. Take, for instance, even in Nigeria right now, with the bank verification number that has just been introduced, that has actually reduced progress since that started, because the machines for the enrollment are not mobile, so is a concern, and the happy thing is that because the government is part of the financial inclusion drivers, they're looking into it, but these are concerns and they are real.
Thank you so much, Adaeze. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to highlight a few key issues. Obviously, this debate or this discussion has not ended. There were lots of questions that you could see in the audience, but really these were just snippets of what has been done elsewhere and what are some of the issues and challenges that people are facing, but what are some of the success stories. And we clearly see that the journey for the client is not linear. I mean, there are lots of interactions, and I think we heard from the panelists about going back to the customers and continuing to engage even after you have onboarded them. So that whole issue which was raised in the morning, acquire, train, and retain. So during that process, to make sure that you keep engaging and talking to them and really understanding what are some of the new issues that they're coming up with, and that there has been change within the institutions. I think that's part of what makes it a bit difficult. Client centricity will require some kind of change, whether it's in culture, whether it's in staffing, it's retraining people, and there are lots of issues that they couldn't share, which we talked about in our discussions about the changes that the institutions had to go through. And lastly, the big issue is what was laid out in the morning, the issue about the customer value, but not just the customer value. Gerard was talking about customer value, but it's actually this whole overlap. Where is the overlap between the customer value and the business case for the institution, which will make it a real win-win? Because if the institution is not winning in the proposition, they're never gonna do it. And I think we got a few snippets into that, but because we have 2 days, you can actually engage any of the panelists and continue this discussion and continue to explore some of the issues which we didn't clear this afternoon. But a round of applause for the panelists, and anybody who asks questions, come for your prizes. Thank you, Rachel.